Rapper Young Gravy has been sued by the Rickroll guy for sampling a portion of that famous Rickroll song that you've probably heard more times than you want to. And I promise that this video will not involve a Rickroll. I'm not going to be playing that song or surprising you or whatever. This is a real lawsuit in Los Angeles County Superior Court and a real fight between Rick Astley, who is the Rickroll guy from this 80s singer that I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute, and Young Gravy, who is an up-and-coming SoundCloud sort of rapper, hip-hop guy, who recently, in kind of a big hit song, had sampled part of the Never Gonna Give You Up, which is the song that you will hear if you've been Rickrolled. Now, what is being Rickrolled? You probably know what this is, and if you don't, you probably have had it happen to you, even if you didn't know what it was. Rickrolling is when there's some video that's clickbait, so probably why like half or more of the viewers are worried, like, when's it going to happen? Come on, it's basically like they'll have like a clickbait title, and so they kind of fake, you're going to see, 100 kittens attacking an alligator or something, and then you click into the video and it shows like a little bit of a kitten or something, and then boom, this real campy 1980s video of Rick Astley singing Never Gonna Give You Up just starts playing, and then so you've basically just been clickbaited into watching this really bad 80s song. Maybe somebody likes it. I don't know. It's getting sampled, so it can't be that bad, but not really my kind of music. It's kind of, crooning, heartthrob, romantic, but what the 1980s thought that should look like. So that happens all the time now. It's in a ton of random videos. I guess it's not as big as it used to be, or I haven't been Rickrolled in some time. Maybe I'm inviting that from the universe by saying that, but it used to be like all over everywhere, and it sort of revived the career of Rick Astley, who had disappeared into obscurity, and now he sort of is this big thing from being kind of a meme trend of just prank. So I'll show you Rick Astley, just so I won't be playing the video here, but I'll show you like what it would look like. Like if you're going to get Rickrolled, you're going to see this image next. So here is what you would see if this were one of these Rickroll prank videos. So basically, it would have had like the intro of me, and then this guy would pop up, and you would see just him like kind of like doing this little thing, singing, and it's real. You can go look it up. Never Gonna Give You Up. You want to go see the song, you can go see it there. And so it was this kind of big trend, and I don't even know when it started, but I can't even remember. It's been 10 years or more since this has been happening, and people just find it funny to go trick people into watching this horrible 1980s song. And so now the song is sort of got interest of its own, and I'm sure some people like it, and they're to each their own on their musical tastes. And so, but this is the guy who is doing it, and his name is Rick Astley, and he has his career has gotten this resurgence from the prank. Now, what about Young Gravy? So maybe you know who Rick Astley is, but have no idea who Young Gravy is, because he's pretty recent. His rise to sort of prominence in the hip hop community is still going on. I mean, he looks like he's getting some key concerts and some other stuff and becoming kind of a big thing. So this is the Young Gravy Instagram page. You can see that he's got 2.1 million followers, so that's a pretty big following that he's built up, and it's only been a few years since he's kind of been like a big hit guy on the scene of hip hop. And here's Young Gravy. Here's him, just hanging out and partying and flashing some cash there, and giving nuts to some kind of squirrel adjacent creature. It doesn't look exactly like a squirrel. I don't know what it is, but he seems to have made friends with it. And so who is Young Gravy? If you don't know who he is, he's basically this, he used to be a pizza delivery guy in Minnesota. And while he was delivering pizza, he was just putting rap up on SoundCloud. And I think that's the story of kind of most hip hop artists these days, is that they are just doing their own thing on SoundCloud. They start getting a lot of attention and views and hits. And then record labels, when they see the rise, they start knocking at the door being like, hey, it looks like you're going to be famous. And so I want some money now, and I want to help you with it. And so Young Gravy has been doing collabs with a bunch of famous people. It's, I think, like Lil Wayne, Lil Baby, Martha Stewart is one of them. So I don't know how you get a Martha Stewart hip hop collab, but that's happening. She's been doing some stuff with him. A lot of his so part of his popularity and what he's been doing, which relates to this lawsuit, is that the way that he kind of got some of his hits was by sampling older music from the 1970s and the 1980s that the younger generation who kind of are fans of him may not have ever even heard of. So he's picked out some good songs like Mr. Sandman is one that he got a big hit from. If you don't know what that is, if you've ever seen Back to the Future, which maybe the Zoomer generation has not seen either, but that was a big kind of part of the movie. It's a 1950s song that was kind of iconic during the era, and Young Gravy has sampled part of it for one of his songs. And then this song, when he decided to do that sample, got him into kind of hot water, which is by getting Rick Astley, wanting to go after him for it. So let's look at the lawsuit and at what Rick Astley is alleging about Young Gravy, and a bunch of other producers are also part of this lawsuit as well. So we can kind of see who, what is the drama. So here is the lawsuit. And if this were a Rickroll video, this would be the moment where I would cut away to the 1980 song, and you would be like, why did I even watch this video in the first place? but this is not a Rickroll video. This is a real lawsuit, and you'll be able to see that this is, actually something that's been filed in California. From Richard Rick Paul Astley. It's filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court. And if we scroll down here, you can see the first person that's Young Gravy, and Matthew Hauri is his real name. And you can see it's a First Amendment complaint, and they outline some, these are the legal theories as to why Rick Astley is suing all these people. And it's not just Young Gravy, it's also the producers on the song and the record label. So he's suing Nick Seeley, who is a producer who goes by the name Popnick, Dillan Francis, who goes by the name DJ Hanzel, David Wilson, who is, I don't know if it's Dwilly or Dwilly. That's, I feel like I'm veering towards boomerhood a little bit when I know the original songs that he's sampling more than the actual songs that he's playing. And so that's, you'll just have to forgive me for being out of touch. But I do know about the lawsuit stuff. And so let's talk about what they're saying in this lawsuit. So this first introduction here is they're kind of just outlining some of the basic law on how this works in California. If you are doing SoundCloud hip hop or something yourself, you're going to want to know about this. You're really going to want to know this law because it matters a lot for, are you going to get nailed for having some kind of lawsuit? And all this stuff that they're quoting is from a case that is from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit covers a bunch of states in kind of the West. It includes California. So if you are in California, this is the binding federal law on you. The Supreme Court is kind of above the Ninth Circuit, and there are other what they call circuits, Court of Appeals in different states, but you basically go up from sort of federal court in California to the Ninth Circuit, then to the Supreme Court. If you don't got a ruling by the Supreme Court, then the Ninth Circuit sort of governs until you do. And so this is quoting stuff from this kind of key case that happened in the 1970s. They actually messed up their citation a little bit. That's a little lawyer inside stuff. If you're a lawyer or a law student, you're probably looking at this going, no, it's got to be the Supreme Court, because the correct way to cite this would be to say Ninth Sir in front of this. And actually, I was a little confused when I was doing my first run through of this, but nope, this is not a Supreme Court case. This quote here is just sort of this thing about basically your voice. And it says, a voice is as distinctive and personal as a face. The human voice is one of the most palpable ways identity is manifested. We are all aware that a friend is at once known by a few words on the phone. So then it says, it quotes this kind of legal treatise, is what it's called, like a big book about the law, that says to impersonate their voice is to pirate their identity, and the singer manifests themselves in the song. And so then it starts quoting, all this is a quote from a case, a big kind of important case for all music makers, from Bette Midler. If you are a Zoomer, do you know who Bette Midler is? You may have seen her in movies. I've talked to some people who actually were like, wait, Bette Midler was a singer? And so she started out being a singer. She's been more recently in movies, and more recently, I'm not sure if what she's really done in recent years, but she was, for a while was an actress more than a singer. But in the 1970s, she was real famous for kind of being this real great singer. She was approached by the Ford Motor Company to basically be in an ad for their cars. And Ford was doing a series of ads that were all different kind of classic songs. And she had one that they wanted to use. And she's like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in your car ad. And said no. And Ford's like, oh, you don't want to be in our car ad? Well, we own the rights to the lyrics of the song, or don't own it. They had kind of the right, they'd licensed it. So what do? We'll just go get a Bette Midler impersonator, and we'll have the impersonator sing the song. And then we'll just play something that sounds exactly like Bette Midler in the car commercial. And then everybody will just think it's a Bette Midler song. And that's what they did. And so Bette Midler is like, what? I'm going to sue you. And she sues Ford Motor Company. She goes up to this Court of Appeals, and the court holds, no, you can't do that. You cannot use an impersonator to sort of take the identity of a singer, because all celebrities, in particular in California, people have what's called a right of publicity. So they can control the use of their image. And the court said the voice, they were saying this stuff above about how the voice is distinctive. It is something that's important to someone's identity, in particular a singer. And it is part of that sort of that right of image or right of publicity that celebrities control, is their voice, especially when they're a singer. So you can't sort of copyright the voice, but you can protect their the use of that voice in recordings in a way that makes someone think that your distinctive voice is being used. And that's going to be the problem for Young Gravy when we get into sort of the details here. And so this says, look, as mentioned, this is no secret. Everyone in the music industry knows this. And despite this, the defendants flagrantly impersonated Rick Astley's voice and falsely stated that he endorsed them, with no request, forewarning, or remorse, causing significant and continuing damage to the plaintiff. In doing so, defendants have literally stolen plaintiff's voice, causing immense damage. And they put it in here. I'll say, first of all, I'm not sure that everyone in the music industry knows this. This is a very complex legal thing. And I will say as a lawyer that the law is actually really complex on copyright and publicity and all this stuff. It's actually real hard to predict like what will happen in one of these because there's all these complex issues of fair use. Sampling in particular is complicated. So Young Gravy's a guy in his 20s. He went from pizza delivery guy to SoundCloud rapper. I would not be surprised if he personally did not know like what the rules are on what he can sample and what he can't. Would the producers know? I mean, they may or may not too. The record company, I will say, probably, they're gonna have lawyers, and someone in the chain of this would know the rules. But I don't think that if you're talking about, can you sue them? That's one thing. You don't really have to know the law to get sued. But if you're sort of trying to decide, like, should we knock Young Gravy about this? I'm not sure that I would say that he should get knocked for not knowing. Like, he may have to pay money, but that doesn't mean he was doing something sort of trying to be bad. And then they say, there's this little footnote here that says, like in Midler, upon information and belief, defendants did obtain a license to the underlying musical composition of Never Gonna Give You Up, which is that song that just sort of plays in the prank videos, something that does not include the right to Astley's voice. Mr. Astley is not a writer of Never Gonna Give You Up, and neither therefore gave permission to use the underlying musical composition nor received any compensation for the license granted. Mr. Astley owns in part the sound recording of Never Gonna Give You Up. Neither he nor his co-owners gave permission to defendants for the use of it. Most importantly, Mr. Astley never gave permission to defendants to copy, imitate, or recreate his voice. So that's an important thing here too, is that when especially if you're a hip hop artist type person, or you want to know the law on this, owning the rights or licensing the rights to like the words or the way it's sung does not give you all the rights to the song. So you can own parts of things, or you can have a license to parts of things. So they, what Rick Astley is saying is like, look, they did just what Ford did. These guys, these producers and Young Gravy went and got kind of part of the rights, but not the rights to my part where I'm singing, I'm Rick Astley. I've got this image, I've got this voice. So you didn't come talk to me. So even though you got, you could have done a Never Gonna Give You Up song with someone else's voice, you don't, like, you're not able to use mine. And it sounds like he's also saying he owns part of the musical composition too. So it's kind of real complex what they even are able to do, even though they might have paid someone for the rights to do some of it. So what is Rick Astley saying about sort of the facts of this case in general? Okay, here is a section called Parties, and this is where they sort of introduce everybody. So they say Rick Astley is a musical artist primarily admired for his instantly recognizable voice known the world over. He is born and continues to reside in England. And they say defendant Matthew Hauri, professionally known as Young Gravy, and they'll just start calling him Gravy, which is why you got the intro art that I used, is a hip-hop artist who commonly uses samples, the digital lifting of the actual sounds from a prior sound recording, in his work. He tours around the United States, including in Los Angeles, most recently on December 4th, 2022, at the Hollywood Palladium, and often records in Los Angeles. And the Palladium is a big stadium. He's doing real well if he's got a tour there. And it says Gravy's newest single is called Betty Get Money. And that's the song that we'll be talking about in this case that has sort of Rickrolled and is now causing a Rickroll lawsuit. This court has general personal jurisdiction over Gravy due to the continuous, repeated, and ongoing business conducts in Los Angeles. So personal jurisdiction is just a concept of, is it fair to kind of bring Young Gravy into California to defend himself? And they're saying, yeah, all this stuff kind of happened here. The song was recorded here. And so that's why this Betty Get Money song, like a lawsuit about it, should be in Los Angeles. Then they start introducing some of these producers. First one is Nick Seeley, who is Popnick, Dillan Francis, who is DJ Hanzel, and David Wilson, who is Dwilly or Dwilly, and in these record companies. And so they just basically are saying all these guys kind of help with this. They helped record it. They're all in California. And that means it's fair to be suing out here for, over this lawsuit about something that happened here. Then they start introducing Mr. Astley, which is Rick Astley. They say Mr. Astley's storied musical career began in the mid-1980s. In 1985, Mr. Astley was the drummer for the soul band FBI. When FBI's singer left the band, Mr. Astley became the group's new lead singer, and due to his signature voice, was quickly recruited by record producer Pete Waterman to pursue a career as a solo artist. Over the course of his career, Mr. Astley has released multiple multi-platinum albums and has had numerous chart-topping songs. Then this says, Mr. Astley's most well-known song, Never Gonna Give You Up, was released in August 1987 and became a worldwide #1 hit. To this day, the song remains embedded in the cultural zeitgeist. And if you don't know that word, that's kind of a German word. The Germans, actually, they love to make up words that sort of fill gaps for us in English. They're not really doing that on purpose, but it's just real easy to like make new words in German because you just smush other words together endlessly. And this cultural zeitgeist just means kind of the general like stuff that we all kind of know about that makes up our cultural, that we all kind of are aware of. So this says, because of this, Mr. Astley had been looking to collaborate with another artist and or producer to create something new with his voice from Never Gonna Give You Up that he would be intimately involved in, for which he would have creative control over in order to protect his brand name, image, and likeness, as well as the artistic integrity of his premier hit record, Never Gonna Give You Up. And then, however, due to defendants' actions described herein, they have obliterated the opportunity for Mr. Astley to successfully pursue such an endeavor. So basically saying like, look, I was looking around for a Never Gonna Give You Up collab, and when then you guys jumped in and just sort of made this, this big thing, and I wasn't involved in it, and so now I can't do, my own new version of this. And it says Mr. Astley is frequently approached by brands wanting to use his name, image, and likeness in connection with their products, and producers and artists wanting to feature him and his voice in their own songs. And Mr. Astley is extremely protective over his name, image, and likeness, and highly selective over what he chooses to endorse and who he affiliates with. Now, you will note one thing that they do not say or talk about at all, which is Rickrolling, and it's sort of like a elephant in the room that's not being mentioned. It seems like maybe Mr. Astley or his lawyers or someone is a little sensitive over the fact that he's kind of like famous basically because of a prank. If I were him, I'd frankly be like, I don't know. I think Rick Astley was kind of, this is just, my opinion, but it seemed like his career was over and done, and he was off in obscurity. I had never heard of him until Rickrolling. I'd listened to a lot of 80s music in college. This was not one of the songs that was being played then. I think I was in college before Rickrolling kind of happened or became a thing. But he kind of got revived by kids doing this prank where they were just forcing people to watch this song against their will over and over and over. And then it eventually kind of became, first it was like, I hate listening to it. And then some people were like, well, I'm just going to be like ironically into it. And then I think maybe there are some people who actually like it because of it's just sort of like they've heard it a bunch. And so he's had this big revival because of Rickrolling. You got to kind of dance with the one that brung you in. Like, if you're going to get famous for that, there's a lot of people who like hate that stuff. They're sort of like, why am I, I don't want to, like William Shatner for a long time hated Star Trek, hated it. He was trying to do other stuff. He was trying to sing Rocket Man terribly. You want to hear the worst song in the universe? Go search for William Shatner's version of Rocket Man. Another guy, Adam West, who used to play Batman in the 1960s. He hated Batman, hated it. And then he, turned it into a career because everyone loved Batman. Everyone loved William Shatner. And they had these big, they couldn't accept it. But when they got older and did accept it, it kind of became like, oh, this is funny. And then they got a lot of work out of that. And, Adam West, rather, got his own Family Guy character and all this stuff. So some people don't even know him from the 1960s Batman. They know him from Family Guy. But none of it happened without becoming, a sort of meme character from what you did originally. And Rick Astley is kind of a meme. He doesn't talk about it anywhere in his lawsuit. Then this says basically now he's getting into his allegations about what Young Gravy did, what these producers did. And just to be clear on this, like we do not have Young Gravy's version of events. We do not have the producer's version of events. When you do a lawsuit, this is the first thing that gets filed. So we're only seeing what Rick Astley says. That does not mean everything he's saying is true. But this is what he is alleging the facts are, and then the defendants will at some point come in and give their version of the facts. But just so you know, we sort of don't have it right now, so I can't really tell you what they're going to say. But the fact that something is in here or alleged in here does not mean that it is that all the stuff that he's saying is going to end up being true. Doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that the jury decides at the end. So Rick Astley is saying that in order to capitalize off the immense popularity for Never Gonna Give You Up, the Young Gravy and these other defendants released this song Betty Get Money, and it says it sort of puts Never Gonna Give You Up into the song, and they included a deliberate and nearly indistinguishable imitation of Mr. Astley's voice throughout the song. This was a deliberate theft of Mr. Astley's voice, because admittedly defendants were unable to obtain a license for a sample, a digital copy of the actual sound of Mr. Astley's voice. And they say that all of the defendants conspired to basically make this fake imitation of Rick Astley's voice, and they were publicly open about doing it. And there's no way the record company couldn't have known about what was being done. There's no way that they couldn't have known about this Bette Midler case. And there's no way they couldn't have known that they didn't have permission. And then he starts getting into some of the sort of things that Young Gravy and the producer people have been writing on social media. He's trying to use to prove his case. So here are the social media comments that Rick Astley is relying on. So he says, on May 18th, 2022, defendant Gray wrote that he had literally been trying to clear the sample of Never Gonna Give You Up for years, LOL. The brackets means he didn't actually say this. It's like saying he wrote something that meant this, but didn't literally say it. And then he says, however, he knew the sample was not cleared, and Mr. Astley would not have cleared it. And it says, despite knowing they had no legal basis to deliberately imitate Mr. Astley's voice, they basically, Gravy put it to Bill. So this is Gravy talking to, Young Gravy talking to Billboard magazine. They're quoting him as saying, he basically remade Never Gonna Give You Up. He used like a sample because it makes it easier legally, which is not the kind of thing you want to say if you're going to do something like this. Then it says, defendant Nick was tasked with imitating Mr. Astley's signature voice for use in Betty Get Money. It says that in his Los Angeles recording studio, Nick recorded this imitation from the ground up to sound identical to the original recording. And I'm not sure what that's quoting, but it sounds like it's quoting this Nick guy. It says, in a video posted on Instagram, Nick stated that I needed someone who sounded like Rick Astley. Truth be told, I auditioned people for 2 weeks before I just decided to do it myself. And it says in the same video, Nick switches between the actual recording of Never Gonna Give You Up and his recreation and asks, can you tell the difference? And this says the public could not tell the difference. It was so successful, the public believed it was actually Mr. Astley singing or a direct sample. And the Wikipedia page for Betty Get Money actually says the song was using a sample of Rick Astley, even though it wasn't. An article in Billboard stated, like Billboard magazine thought that Betty Get Money samples Never Gonna Give You Up. Then this says that Young Gravy's biography on allmusic.com states that Young Gravy offered up the Rick Astley sampling Betty Get Money, which became his first top 100 hit, landing at number 30. Basically, all these websites like think it's a sample of Rick Astley when it's actually not. And then, like, one of the things that I think made Rick Astley mad and might have led to this lawsuit is saying that it's because these guys, according to Rick Astley, were like actually telling people that he endorsed it. So he's quoting them saying that he blanks with the song, he digs the song, he approved it, he's a fan. And so Rick Astley is like, those statements are false. I am not a fan. I did not approve the song, and I don't like what you did. Now, if we look at the paragraph 29, they start basically saying, look, you absolutely had to know about this Bette Midler case. It's such a big thing in the industry. You needed a license, which is why you went and got the license. Couldn't, like, a Young Gravy even admitted that he was trying and failing for years to get the sound recording license. So they just kind of stole Rick Astley's. They like, look, same thing as what happened to Bette Midler. Not protected by the First Amendment, and that they've admitted that it's not because they boasted that they were doing it for commercial gain, which is money. It's like a huge hit. It's the single for Gravy's third studio album, Marvelous. Say that this song has been certified gold in the U.S., Canada, and Australia. It's like great. It's all over streaming. Huge hit. So they're basically like, look, Young Gravy's making all this money. Rick Astley, want my cut, and I didn't get my cut. I'm going to get my cut. And frankly, the reality, I'll say, like, the Bette Midler case is pretty strong for Rick Astley. And if they're saying this stuff on social media, they're probably going to have to pay Rick Astley something. They're going to get Rickrolled if they don't, and it's legally. So I'll walk y'all through a little bit about what these legal causes of action are, because they are important to people who are like, if you are like want to do your own music. First thing would be, don't run around bragging about sampling someone's voice without their permission. Don't claim someone endorsed you when they didn't. You're gonna get in trouble if you do that. You're absolutely gonna get in trouble, and here's why: because there's something called a right of publicity. The first cause of action that they're suing. Cause of action is a legal theory that gives you the right to cover money from someone if you all the parts of it, elements of it. So Rick Astley is right of publicity. Basically, laws in a lot of states, and especially in California, because we have so many celebrities here and have for many, many years, they passed like a real strong law that protects people to have the right to kind of their own image, have the right to publicity about themselves. If you can't override the First Amendment, but the more you are trying to use it for just make money, the more likely that you're going to sort of be on the wrong side of the law, and the other person who's suing you would have rights under it. Examples are things like it's so complex, but like if you did a documentary about someone, you probably see a lot of commentary videos on YouTube, whatever. They're not going to be able to sue the commentary video, right? Because that person is making documentary commenting, exercising their first rights. That's something where even if they're trying to make money, think about it like the news networks make money when they talk about the news. There's ads in the middle of it, and so just the fact that you don't that money off it is not enough to sort of don't have a right to talk about something or to show his image like I'm doing this video, right? But the more you start going to just like, I'm making my own song and I'm putting him in it and I'm saying he endorsed it and I'm just trying to make money with it, the less you're going to be able to say, is this clearly is not a parody, kind of not a comment on Rick Astley. It's really just like a song using him. It's hard for them to fall within of kind of the exceptions First Amendment gives to people. So um, they Rick Astley is suing. He says, I have this right to publicity, trying to profit off my distinct voice. You're this, fact that everyone's familiar with this, never going to give you up to like promote your own song by having me be kind of a feature without paying me for it. And they say basically that they've made all this profit off it. They don't have an agreement with Rick Astley that like I should just get millions of dollars of money. You also have to give me, they call it disgorge all the profits from this, because you've been unjust enrichment is a very complex topic. I actually just did a separate video on that one because it is so complex it needs time. But the general theory is basically the court just sort of says, um, you have unfairly taken something that doesn't belong to you, no agreement, and justice requires that you give it back to the person you owe. And you got all this money, that should be my money because my voice and my line in your song without you getting permission. He also wants exemplary and punitive damages. Those are to punish someone. They can be like multiples of what their actual financial profit or damage was. Um, they sue under this Lanham Act. This would be its own separate video, but as well, when you get into these legal topics, like unless you want to make the video 5 hours long, you kind of have to truncate. The Lanham Act is a federal law about unfair competition. It gives people the right to sue businesses fairly with one another. Very complex law, but that's basically what they're doing over. And you created this confusion, have like made it look like I endorse you. You've quotes saying like, "Yeah, I've got the official Rickroll endorsement," and that's not real. Like I'm suing you. They sue under. Next one is California Civil Code provision. So the civil code. What is the civil code? The civil code is like just like a kind of a bunch of laws put together that were passed by the California government that are grouped that way just because they're generic stuff. You can have like a vehicle code covers like cars and car accidents and things like that. Probate code covers like death and what do you do if there's a will or whatever. Family code covers family law and divorce and things like that. Civil code is just what happens in civil lawsuits. So this number that it gives, 3344, is a section of the civil code, is something that is specific to the right to your image. It says basically that you can sue someone if they sort of misappropriate, which means just like use without your permission your image, and that includes your voice. And so Rick Astley is suing under that. He basically says kind of the same thing as above, and he's just like, I get money under this law too. Um, The unfair competition law is a California law that is kind of equivalent, not equivalent exactly. It's kind of a interesting. Well, it's an interesting law all on its own because it lets you sue for like any violation of any other law, lets you sue for doing anything unfair. It's kind of unique to California. It's a little bit similar to that Lanham Act we are talking about, and it basically says like if you do something unfair in competition, I can sue you. The damages are a little bit limited. I don't think he can get his attorney's fees under it, I'm not sure if you can even get punitive damages. I think it's just restitution. That's something that I think he may have gone a little far, but that's kind of common for people doing it under that law. There's ways to get attorney's fees, but he is not using those ways, at least that I can see. And this says that, so now he's like asking for, here's what I want. Look, I just want damages. I want the cost of my suit. I want my attorney's fees. I want like millions of dollars. Give me all the money that was made from selling or from your kind of sampling of me. So is the Rickroll guy going to get a cut of the gravy? I mean, that's kind of the key question. And I think the answer is probably yes. I think that he is going to be compensated for this. I don't think he'll get like, I mean, he might be able to get a large chunk of it. If they went to the end to a jury, that verdict could be huge, depending on how much money had been made. The problem really is like if those statements are really things that he was quoting that they were making on social media, and if they really were suggesting he endorsed it when he didn't, that they're just kind of like they've crossed the line into stuff they shouldn't have been doing, and someone should have advised them kind of not do this or go get give them a cut up front. You're going to pay a lot less on the back end. Usually they negotiate these things, they settle them, and probably Rick Astley will get some payment from the record company for having let all this out, because they're usually the ones who make a lot of the money anyway. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what the response from Young Gravy is and what occurs with this lawsuit. If you want to hear more videos like this, you can hit subscribe, or there's some other ones on the end roll thing that you can look at, and we'll find out whether he has to pay all his profits off to some guy from the 80s who went from prank to punking all the younger rap stars.